Hi, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is RegWatch by RegulatorWatch.com. Something is deeply wrong at the heart of public health, and nowhere is it more visible than in tobacco control. It's not just flawed science or policy overreach, it's a deeper rot, a crusading belief that adult autonomy doesn't matter. At the root is a belief that history itself is marching toward a righteous end, and that nothing, not evidence, not ethics, not even lives saved, can be allowed to get in the way. This belief has a name: teleology. In classical philosophy, teleology is the idea that the world is moving toward a predetermined end, a final purpose. The Greeks called that purpose the telos. The tobacco control movement's original telos was clear: end smoking-related disease and death. They even gave it a name: the tobacco Endgame. But in recent years, a quiet mutation has taken place, with smoking rates collapsing across the Western world and more than 100 million people switching to vaping and other safer nicotine products. The telos has changed. No longer is the goal to end smoking. Now it's to end all nicotine use. And with that shift, the war on smoking became a war on nicotine, even in its far safer, smoke-free forms. Tobacco control's new endgame has gone almost entirely unchallenged. No media reckoning, no public debate, no policy vote. It simply happened, as if handed down from on high. And make no mistake, this shift in purpose changes everything about tobacco control. For years, tobacco control crusaders justified their tactics by claiming they were saving lives. But now, with nicotine as the target, those tactics may no longer be justifiable. Nicotine doesn't cause cancer or lung disease, and it's only mildly more addictive than caffeine. So to justify their war on nicotine, tobacco control must distort science, smear harm reduction, and grossly exaggerate the risks of safer products. To reach their nicotine-free utopia, every alternative, every compromise, every inconvenient data point becomes a threat. Tobacco harm reduction, a dangerous industry plot. Declining youth smoking, just a distraction. Millions of adults quitting with vaping, doesn't count, they haven't really quit. In a teleological system, facts that don't serve the goal are dismissed, and people who stand in the way are crushed. That's the nature of teleological thinking. Truth isn't measured by evidence, it's measured by alignment. If a fact advances the end, it's welcomed. If it doesn't, it's heresy. Which brings us to big tobacco. For decades, tobacco control has defined itself in opposition to the sins of the cigarette industry, and for good reason. From the 1950s through the 1990s, the global tobacco industry denied the science, deceived the public, and delayed regulation. It's an inglorious past, but tobacco control treats these actions as original sins, ones that can never be forgiven. Even as companies like Philip Morris International now generate over 40% of their revenue from smoke-free products, even as British American Tobacco pushes toward 25% non-combustibles, even as major players invest tens of billions in research, comply with regulation, and pivot toward a smoke-free future, they remain cast as villains. Take this example, published in June 2025 in the BMJ. The headline reads, "Tobacco-funded research still appearing in top medical journals." In the piece, BMJ takes aim at leading medical journals for failing to ban studies funded wholly or in part by the tobacco industry. Ruth Malone, professor of social and behavioral sciences at the University of California and former editor-in-chief of BMJ's Tobacco Control Journal, calls for the total disengagement from the industry across institutions, professional bodies, and scientific publications. Quote, "Anyone who understands the history, extent, and nature of the epidemic, and the tobacco industry's strategic efforts to divide the public health community, knows that industry money should be rejected." BMJ then announces an update to its own 2013 tobacco policy. Starting June 2025, not only will it continue to block tobacco-funded research, but it will also exclude any work authored by researchers with personal financial ties to the industry. You see, in a teleological framework, there is no path to redemption. There is only exile. But those in public health and tobacco control who think this way should be cautious, because they too could one day be painted with a scarlet letter. According to renowned medical historian Robert N. Proctor, in his groundbreaking book, The Nazi War on Cancer, many health reforms we now regard as progressive and even socially responsible were first promoted by the Nazis in the years leading up to and including the Second World War. Most shockingly, Nazi scientists were the first to clearly link smoking to lung cancer. Proctor notes that Germany, under Nazi rule, led one of the world's first public health campaigns against smoking, including the earliest known epidemiological studies identifying a connection between smoking and cancer. It was, in his words, the most aggressive anti-smoking campaign in modern history. So should today's public health leaders be demonized or exiled because of what their predecessors did? Of course not. But by that same logic, neither should those working to transform the tobacco industry, moving it away from combustion and toward less harmful smoke-free alternatives. If redemption is offered to one group, it must be offered to all. If not, it's fanaticism. Tobacco control presents itself as a movement for the public good, but too often it behaves like a moral crusade. Nicotine is treated as a sin. Abstinence becomes a virtue. Policies are crafted not just to reduce harm, but to punish, and anyone who interferes, no matter their record, is damned. But this retribution isn't reserved for big tobacco alone. Independent innovators are treated as moral threats too. The U.S. vaping movement began as a grassroots consumer-led rebellion. Thousands of vape shops, thousands of e-liquid brands. Many were built by former smokers with no ties to big tobacco, some openly hostile to it. And yet they're treated no differently. Anti-tobacco organizations routinely conflate these independents with the very cigarette companies they rebelled against. Guilt by association, or worse, guilt by mere proximity to nicotine. Because in this worldview, nicotine itself is the impurity, and anyone who touches it is contaminated. This is where harm reduction and tobacco control fundamentally part ways. Harm reduction is empirical. It doesn't care who makes the product. It doesn't care about moral ideology. It asks simple questions. Does this help smokers quit? Does it reduce harm? Does it give people agency and choice? Tobacco control doesn't ask those questions anymore. Why? Because it already has its answer.